to start, you just ping me and then we will start.
Yes, so I was about to say the same only. We can start now. It's 3
Okay,
o'clock.
okay,
We can start with
okay.
the meeting.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So once again, good afternoon to all of you. And in the previous lecture, I think on Friday, we have discussed about the another class of consensus protocol, that is because we have already noticed that in case of permission environment, if my environment is a private environment, I'm using private blockchain, or my environment is a permission environment, and there are a couple of in my network, there are the presence of the 40 nodes, then we have already noticed it that reaching to a common consensus is going to be a big trouble if we are going to take an example of Paxos and Raft. So in order to avoid that particular problem and in order to handle the Byzantine behavior of the node, we have discussed in the previous session about the Byzantine fault tolerance and practical Byzantine fault tolerance. So what is the agenda for today lecture? So agenda for today lecture is like that. We need to discuss some of the internals of the blockchain by taking some examples, and we need to discuss what is the challenge response mechanism, what is the notion of consensus, and we will discuss that what is inside the block, what is there inside the block, because multiple times we have used this statement that the blockchain structure is like that. We are having a blockchain. Inside the blockchain, we are having multiple blocks, and inside the blockchain, we are having some kind of transactions. So today we will see that what exactly are there inside the blocks, and what about the block header, what is the structure of the block, and at the last, we will see that what is the notion of consensus, what is the challenge response based mechanism. And today we need to wind up one implementation at the last. After this discussion, we need to take one implementation that is related to the how the reward is going to be distributed. So we will see that implementation in Node.js, that how you have created a blockchain and you have started the mining procedure, and how the reward is going to be distributed among the different stakeholders. So that is related to the the agenda for today lecture. So just to start, the architectural principles of blockchain. So you know it very well that let me open the pointer. You know it very well that the blockchain is going to be a kind of a platform where you can execute your transactions, or let's say, for example, it's going to be a kind of a open platform or the closed platform, or sometime a kind of a consortium platform, or we need to execute some of the transactions for what purpose, because if I encounter a kind of a problem, let's say, for example, I need to consider one example that in a class there are 10 students, and these 10 students, they don't have trust on each other, but they want to start their own startup, their own business. Okay, so who will be the responsible for maintaining the trust among themselves? So this is going to be a kind of a revolutionary technology, blockchain, which is, we can call it as a public ledger also, because there are certain attributes associated with the blockchain. That's the way we can call it as a, because it contains some kind of time-stamped ledger, or sometime a kind of a ordering mechanism we need to follow. And every transactions that are committed inside the blockchain, we can call it as they all are immutable, because what is there inside the block, the all transactions are immutable. No one or no node or no user has the right to modify already committed transactions. So the structure is like that. We are having a chain of transactions. Some transactions are already committed transaction. Committed means what? The transactions, those are already occurred in the network, or for which the mining has already been taken place. And these transactions are already a part of the blockchain. And sometime in the case, we are having a list of transactions that we are willing to accommodate in the blockchain. So basically this blockchain, sometimes we can call it as a up and only shared ledger, because sometimes it is only used in order to add the transactions, which is going to be replicated across the entire network. Let's say in your network, if you are having 20 nodes, so all the 20 nodes are having a kind of a distributed ledger, and ultimately the objective is like that. The each and every individual user is having the refreshed and updated copy. So now we need to see that graphically also, as well as by taking some examples also. Source I have already mentioned on each of my PPT that from where I have taken this as a screenshot to demonstrate you that how we can say that the block inside the blockchain is having a kind of a all the data or the transactions that are inside the block and is cryptographically secured. How can we say? So if I pose a particular question here that inside the blockchain we are having multiple block, and how can I justify that within a kind of a multiple transactions are there inside the block. So what exactly there inside the block and how individual blocks are getting connected with each other. Let's say in the blockchain we are having multiple blocks, and within the block we are having multiple transactions. So the first question is what is inside the block and how individual blocks are getting connected with each other. So uh, here my viewpoint is entirely different. We can say that because in cryptography and network security, you have two terms. First one is the hash and then the digital signature. So we will talk about it also that why I have selected these two as an example here. But prior to that, let me give the answer of this question that what is there inside the block and how individual blocks are getting connected. So digitally signed and encrypted transactions, those are available inside the block, and that can be verified by the peers or by all the stakeholders, all the nodes, those are the part of your network. What is the meaning of that? It means that the participant can only view what is inside the block. Let's say, for example, in your blockchain, you are having thousands of nodes, thousands of users are there. So they can only see that what is inside a particular block in a view only mode, whatever be the restrictions that are applied to them. So we can say that cryptographically it is secured. Every transaction is cryptographically secured. What is the meaning of that? That means it ensures that participant can only view the information on the ledger that they are authorized to see. It is not like that all the informations are publicly available to each and every individual. So the information that they are entitled to see, only this much information is available to them. The rest of the information is not visible to them. So this is the way we can say that what is inside the block. So inside the block, we are having multiple transactions, and we will take an example, or we will take the structure of the block also in the subsequent slide. So how individual blocks are getting connected? They are connected by using the like in the data structure, we are having the concept of linked list. So similarly, the next block will contain the hash of the previous block. So that's the way these all blocks are connected in the blockchain. So next question, if I pose a question here that why the blockchain is called as a container data structure, whether this statement is true or false. So according to me, this statement is true. The blockchain, we can also call it as a container data structure. Why? Because the blockchain contains multiple block, and the data representation or the data storage capability used by the block using the concept of the container data structure. That means it contains a series of transactions. So it is not like that within the block we have the scope of only to add only one transaction. So that is the reason that why we call the block as a container data structure, because whatever be the informations, whatever be the transactions that we are going to store inside the transaction, or already committed transactions, all are stored in a series of transactions. That's the way it is called the container data structure. Now, if I take an example of, let's say, Bitcoin. So you know, Bitcoin is a public or private network. Right in the chat window, Bitcoin is which category of network? Public or private, or permissionless or permission? Right in the chat window that Bitcoin is which kind of network? Public network or private network, or permissionless network or permission network? Write in the chat window. Any student? Public, very good, very good. It's a public environment. Environment is public, or we can say it's a permissionless environment. So that means a block, anyone can join the network at any instant of time. So in blockchain, in Bitcoin, if I take an example of Bitcoin, a block may contain more than 500 transactions on average, and the average size of the block is around 1 MB. So there might be some kind of dilemma among many students that what will be the size of the block, how many transactions one block will contain, and what is the value of the timestamp. So in order to solve these queries, I have kept a very fundamental slide in this lecture so that you are aware that and what is the meaning of challenge response mechanism. So we will discuss one by one the basic functionalities. So a block may contain more than 500 transactions on average, and the average size of the block is around 1 MB. This is an upper bound proposed by Satoshi Nakamoto in 2010, but the size may grow up to 8 MB or sometime higher. So next question comes that up to what size, if the size of the block increases, then what harm we are going to have. So that type of question we are going to take at the last of this session. So, but the size of the block may vary. So sometimes it go beyond 8 MB also. So now the next question comes, let's say, for example, if I have a larger size block. So larger block can help in processing large number of transactions. If I am having large size block, then large number of transactions or more number of transactions can be accommodated in a single slot. So this is going to be a win-win situation that if we keep the block size large, then more number of transactions are going to be committed in a single go. But what is the harm? So which is one of the advantage of having a larger size of the block, but at the same time, it has some challenges also. So that we will discuss when we discuss the consensus algorithm, because we have discussed in the consensus algorithm, because that part we have already discussed. Now I will tell the answer to this question, because we have already discussed about the consensus mechanisms with respect to the environment, that is separate class of consensus protocol for the permissionless environment, that is proof of work, proof of one, proof of stake, proof of last time, and for the permission environment, that is Paxos, Raft, Byzantine fault tolerance, and practical Byzantine fault tolerance. So if we keep the block size larger, then the difficulty we are going to increase, and if we are the harm will be longer transaction. Very good, very good. So any other student want to give the reply? So if we take the, I again pose a question, if we have the block size larger, then it is going to be a good situation, that win-win situation, that more number of transaction can be accommodated in a single go. But what will be the disadvantages if we keep the block size larger or sometime beyond 8 MB? Then what are the disadvantages, or what are the problems that we are going to face? Anyone want to reply? Any student? Write in the chat window. Very good. Because mining will take more time. If the mining will take more time, then what happen? You need to invest, or the miner will need to invest more resources. If the miner need to invest more resources, then ultimately your system will face some kind of problems. Problems number one is what? Because security point of view, if I take, it is just like that you are scanning your entire system in a single stretch, and you are scanning your system following a modular approach one by one. First, you are going to scan your external drive first, then you are going to scan your internal drive, and then the other medium. So it is just like that. If you are making the large size block, then definitely it is going to be advantageous for you that the more transactions you are going to commit in a single go, but at the same time, it will create a burden on the mining procedure, or sometimes create a kind of a difficulty also in terms of the resource consumptions from the point of view of the miner. Moving further, what is the structure of a block? What exactly there inside the block? So inside the block, we are having four fields. First one is the block size, then the block header, then the transaction counter, and the transactions. So if we take an example of size, let's say what is the size of the block? Inside the block, we are having the first field, that is the block size. So 4 bytes are reserved for the block size, that is the size of the block, and 80 bytes are reserved for the block header. So this block header includes the field from the block header. It describes the next section also, that where you need to store the data. And next field is the transaction counter. So we need to keep it variable. Why we have kept it variable? Because it contains a total number of transactions in the block. Sometimes we need to store only few transactions. Sometimes we need to store more transactions. So that's the way this field, we have to keep the size of this field as variable. But the size may ranges from 1 to 9 bytes. And transactions, so all transactions that are already committed, or are the part of, or you are willing to commit these transactions. So again, the size of it is variable, because it depends upon the requirement that where you want to apply this blockchain. So in nutshell, the structure of a block, inside the block, we are having the block size, the block header, transaction counter, and the transactions. So now, uh, if we see the structure of the block header, then inside the block header, see, block header is one of the component of the block. But if you see in large, because this block header will play an important role here. Why? Because this includes the next subsection also, or the next part of your blockchain also, next part of your block also sometimes. So in this way, it contains various fields, like which version you are going to use. So for that, 4 byte size is reserved. What is the previous block has, what is the Merkle root, what is the timestamp, or the difficulty you have set, like we have seen in the case of proof of case, that we have to set the difficulty. When I think in the last session we have discussed about the implementation of proof of work, where we have seen that if I'm going to increase the difficulty level, then the mining procedure will take more time, and sometimes it is very tedious to get the results within a predefined time. But so if you want to keep the difficulty high, then your mining process will take time. So these are the structure of a block header. So like 4 bytes are reserved for the version. That means the which version of the block you are using, in order to, why it is so important, because you need to go for the validation process also. So according to the version by version, each version will have different set of rules when it comes to the validation of that particular block. That's the way this version plays an important role here. Second one is the previous block header hash. So 32 bytes are reserved for this previous block header hash. So here it is a kind of a double SHA hash in order to generate the hash for this particular header. Next, the Merkle root hash, 32 bytes are reserved for the Merkle root hash. So this is again here it is a double SHA 256 hash of Merkle tree of all the transactions that are included in the block. So timestamp, for the timestamp in the block header, we have reserved 4 byte size, because ultimately you need to this field contains what? This field contains the approximate creation. Merkle root we are going to discuss in this slide. I have 2 to 3 PPTs about the Merkle root, because this is very important topic in the blockchain, that how we are going to store the data. So need not to worry, we are going to discuss about it in the today lecture only. Okay. Then for the timestamp, we have to save the size of 4 byte. So that means it contains some kind of approximate creation time of the block. Then the difficulty target, for that we have to reserve 4 byte in the block header. So this is basically the current difficulty target of the network block, which is fixed in order to mine the new block. Then the nonce, for the nonce we have to reserve the 4 byte. So this is basically an arbitrary number that the miner change repeatedly, round by round, to produce a hash that is sometimes lower than the difficulty target. So this is basically the structure of a block, and we can say the structure of a block header. And now moving further, so now we can say that the structure of the block, if you represent that particular table, refer this particular table. So blockchain is a chain of blocks where each block is linked to its previous block. by referencing the previous block. So in this particular case, the linking makes sure that no transactions can be modified unless the block that records it and all the blocks that follow it are also modified. So this is the way that Merkle root is going to play an important role. We are going to discuss it that why, if I say a particular pose a question here that why the tampering of data is not feasible in the blockchain based network. So you can just give the reply by saying that blockchain is a container data structure which uses a kind of a Merkle root representation for the storage of the data. So in case of Merkle root, when we are going to discuss about Merkle root, so Merkle root will tell you the answer that if you are going to make any kind of alteration in the already committed transaction, then it is going to disturb the entire structure of the entire network. So which gives a kind of a feeling to the everyone, every node or every user that something wrong is going on in the network. So now, maybe you are aware about it that what do you mean by Genesis block? So you know it or not, Genesis block? Right in the chat window, you know about what is Genesis block, or previous speakers has covered about the Genesis block or not? What exactly the meaning of Genesis block? Okay, very good. So starting block of the blockchain. Yes, yes, initial block, very good. So we can say it's a also we can call it as a zeroth block. So manually we have to create it. So there is no need to create. We need to start like in the blockchain implementation also. Maybe before two lecture we have seen that we need to create it manually. So now moving further, this is again the first block of the Bitcoin that we can call it as a Genesis block, or sometime in the literature, if you refer, we can also call it as a block zero. So this was coined in 2009 by the Satoshi Nakamoto. Now moving further, have you heard about this term? In today lecture, I am going to discuss more about the technical terms that are you people are encountered or you people referred in various literature and which will create a kind of a hurdle for you. So Stele block, have you heard about this orphan block or Stele block or sometime the detached block? Only you need to write in the chat window yes or no, so that I will explain it up to that depth that whether that particular content has already been covered or not. Okay, so no problem. So what exactly the meaning of a Stele block? Let's say, for example, I create a scenario. Let's say you have created some block and every miner is working to solve a particular puzzle that was posed by the network itself. And we believe that, let's say, someone has already have a kind of a solution to the problem which was posed by the network itself. So that's the way we can say when a block is solved, or every other miner who is still working to find a solution to the problem, or problem means what, to find the hash puzzle, is working on that particular block. So as the block is no longer required to be worked on, so this is considered to be as a Stele block. So that means what is the meaning of the Stele block? Sometimes there is a requirement in the blockchain that two persons simultaneously at the same time having the solution to the same problem. So now we have to consider one, and there is some timestamp also attached to it, because within that stipulated time period, every miner have to give a kind of a reply to the, or reply means what, to give a kind of a solution. Then depending upon that, we can say that yes, yes, yes. So now we can say that in this particular case, there might be some chances where we can say that there are some situation arises where there are a single blockchain can be split into two different blockchain. Okay, I again repeat, there are some circumstances, let's say two persons simultaneously have the solution to a particular problem, and there are some timestamp associated with that, but the two person are having the same solution. But for first person, let's say for example, I am just considering example, out of these two person, one person we have to assume that the person has already solved the challenge, and the network and that challenge is accurate and their transactions are added into the blockchain. But the other person, because of the timestamp or because of some time synchronization problem, that although having some kind of solution which is near to the possible solution, but their blocks are not added into the blockchain. So in this process, your entire blockchain is split into two different blockchain. So here comes the role of the orphan block, or we can call it as a stele block. So where the orphan blocks are also called as a detached block and were accepted at one point in time by the network as a valid block. Why more emphasis is given here as at one point in time by the network? Because later on you don't require them. So I will tell you why you don't require them, but were rejected when a proven longer chain was created that did not include this initially accepted block. So it is just like that. Consider a healthcare scenario where you have a paramedical staff, you have healthcare professionals, you have doctors, you have patients. So for that, for all of them, you need to create a separate blockchain. Okay, I'm just taking an example, and everyone want to take part in the mining procedure. Okay, so scenario is like that. Your application is healthcare, and you have a separate blockchain for each and every segment. And let's say, for example, any new doctor you want to add into the existing blockchain, or let's say some doctors are having their transactions that they want to commit into the blockchain. Or transaction means what? That they want to store the record of the old patient. Let's say I'm just taking an example. So now it happens practically many times that let's say one of the doctor is working connected to your blockchain from US, and one connected from the India, one connected from the China. So there is a difference in the time zone also. So this problem in the blockchain, we can call it as a time synchronization problem. Okay, and all, let's say, I believe 3 out of them are having the solution to the problem, which was posed by the network. But because of this time synchronization problem, their transactions are not added into the blockchain. Only, let's say I'm just taking an example from a doctors from India whose transactions are added into the blockchain, or rest two are not added into the blockchain. Then we have to detach these particular blockchain, and this new transactions are added into the longest blockchain. So longest blockchain means what? It is not, we are just counting the number of blocks. I again repeat, longest blockchain means not we are just counting the number of blocks. We are counting the work done by the miners. If let's say I am having two blockchain, and which one I will consider the longest blockchain. So viewpoint is like that. The blockchain which will, where the miners will have done already done the large amount of work in order to take part in the mining process. So this blockchain we can consider as a longest blockchain, and we are keep adding the transactions into the longest blockchain. Okay, so that's the way this we can call it as a orphan block. And orphan blocks for this particular transaction we can consider as a valid block, but for the rest of the subsequent transaction we can consider them as a invalid block, because in the orphan block we are not going to add any kind of transactions. Okay, so now moving further, this will create a kind of a very renowned problem in the blockchain network that we can call it as a fork basically. So let me give you an example of fork, and then we will discuss the categories of fork. Because of the distributed nature of Bitcoin, the network fork, which is a kind of a situation that occurs when two or more blocks have the same block height. Let's say two blocks are having the same height. Now, which will you need to consider? If the two blocks are having the same block height, now which will you need to consider? So this is a very common problem in the blockchain that we can call it as a network fork problem, when a kind of a situation will arise where two or more blocks have the same block height, and now it is going to be a kind of a hurdle for the entire network that whose transactions are going to be added into the blockchain next if the two blocks are having the same height. So now the transaction is going to be stored on the block number 1 or block number 2. So in this cases where two nodes simultaneously announce a valid block and result in a situation where there are two blockchains with different transactions. So this is the situation which will create two, or which will split the entire blockchain into two different variations where the two nodes simultaneously announce a valid block that can result in a situation where, I again repeat, where there are two blockchains with different transactions. So this is an undesirable situation in the blockchain network, but can be addressed by the Bitcoin network only by accepting a longest chain. So I again repeat, this is a kind of a myth about some of the readers that the longest chain we will consider the chain that has the highest number of block or the large number of block. It is not like that. We need to consider the work carried out by all the miners. If the work carried out by all the miners are more as compared to the other block, then we will consider that particular chain as the longest chain. So in this case, the smaller chain will be considered the orphan chain, which is not going to be continued further. Okay, so for this particular round, all the that's the way this line is written here, that at this point in time by the network as a valid block. So for this particular round, we will consider them as a valid block, but for the subsequent block, we are not going to consider it. That's the way we can consider it as an orphan blocks. So if an adversary, let's say from the attacker perspective, if I talk about, if an adversary managed to gain, let's say 50% of 51% of the control of the entire network hash rate, that means the computationally power he has more than 51%. So then they can impose their own version of transaction history, which is going to be a big trouble for your entire network. So moving further, this fork can be divided into two types: the soft fork and hard fork. So soft fork and hard fork. So soft fork means what? In case of soft fork, a client which chooses not to upgrade to the latest version supporting the updated protocol will still be able to work and operate normally. That means in case of the soft fork, a client which chooses not to upgrade to the latest version supporting the updated protocol. So that means in case of the soft fork, the user or the node is going to update the protocol that is still able to work and operating normally. So in this particular case, the previous and the new blocks are both acceptable because there is a kind of a updation requirement. So thus making a soft fork backward compatible. So in case of soft fork, only miners are required to upgrade to the new client software in order to make use of a new protocol rules. At the same time, if we compare the soft fork with the hard fork, so hard fork invalidates previously valid blocks and require all the users to upgrade. It is just like that compared to situations. In case of the hard fork, we need to upgrade all the transactions that are that we need to commit. But in case of, so it is just like that, we need to refresh the entire log that is available in case of hard fork. But in case of soft fork, we need to update only that particular transaction. So this is the difference between the hard fork and the soft fork. So in case here, the new transaction types are sometimes added as a soft fork, and any changes such as the block structure, if you want to change, or you want to change a major protocol changes, then you need to go for the hard fork. So in what situation you want to opt for the soft fork or for the hard fork? So let's say, for example, if you want to add a new transactions sometime, then you can go for the soft fork. And if my requirement is like that, no, I need to change the entire block structure, or I want to change the consensus protocol that I'm going to use in this particular mining procedure, then we can go for the hard fork, because in case of hard fork, it is the prerequisite that you need to upgrade the entire information that is available inside the previously valid blocks. So now moving further, so this is basically the structure of a blockchain. So this PPT is going to be a kind of a reference from the context of the Bitcoin. So if you see it very carefully, let me first give a kind of a explanation from the example point of view. So this is going to be a block. Okay, so inside the block, we are having the multiple transactions. So it contains two parts basically. The block will contain two parts. First one is the block header and the list of transactions. So this is the block header. Here you will get the entire information about the block, that the block is supporting which kind of transactions, what is the height of the block, what is the timestamp of the block, received at what time, or what is the difficulty level, what is the size of the block or weight or version. And this is basically the header of the block. And inside the block, we are having multiple transactions. So this is a kind of example of a transaction that this transaction, this is the hash of the transaction. And this is going to be the Bitcoin that is to be transferred for this from which account to which account. So this is transaction number one. It is just like the passbook that you are having your bank passbook. In the front of your bank passbook, you are having all the informations pertaining to your address, your email ID, IFSC code, bank account number. And once you open your passbook, then inside your passbook, you are having all kind of transactions, that how much amount is credited to your account, how much amount is debited from your account. So it is just like that. So block will contain two components. The first component is the block header, and the second component is the list of transactions. So here the block height is the number of blocks before a particular block in the blockchain. That means this height here, it is mentioned like that 500312. If you refer my cursor, here it is mentioned that this is the height of the main chain, that is 500312. So what does it indicate? It indicates the block height of a particular block. That means the number of blocks that are already the part of this particular blockchain. So 500312 number of blocks are already part of this blockchain before committing or before adding this particular block into the existing blockchain. So if you see the current height of the blockchain pertaining to the Bitcoin, if I take an example, so as of February 2021, the current height of the block is 670,150 blocks are already added into the existing blockchain. If I take an example of Bitcoin as a blockchain, and the current size of the Bitcoin blockchain as of February 2021 is 321 GB. So see this particular data, if you want to work on the real-time existing blockchain, then 321 GB of high performance computing you require. So that's the way sometimes it is not feasible for every organization to work on the real-time implementation for this particular case. And this is ever evolving size, and this is also ever evolving size, because number of transactions are that's the way we can say that the height of the block is also increasing, and the size of the blockchain is also increasing, because number of transactions, the reason for that is the number of transactions are already committed, and are a very long list is there whose transactions are going to be committed. Now moving further, so now we are going to discuss about the block header. So we will take one by one because transactions in the blocks, if you take an example of structure of a block, so there are two components, the block header and list of transactions. So if we want to expand it more, that what is inside the block header. So inside the block header, we are having a kind of a metadata about the block. So what does this metadata contains? It contains what is the previous hash. Okay, so this one is the previous hash of the block, because it is already it is a kind of a linking of different blocks. So each block is connected with the other block by using the hash. So the metadata containing with the block is the previous hash block, then some kind of mining statistics which is used to construct the block, and Merkle root which store all kind of transactions, what kind of mechanisms it is going to use, and the previous block has, which is going to be where the every block inherit some kind of previous block. Why? Because we use the previous block has to create the new block, and because that's the way we make, or we can say that the blockchain is a kind of a tamper-proof mechanism. So now I am directly jumping to Merkle tree and then come back to the previous discussion. So this is the Merkle tree root basically, which is going to be a kind of a backbone of the blockchain. So if I take an example, let's say for example, what is the structure? It is going to be a parent-child like relationship. Let's say for example, I am having at the bottom, now see my cursor, I am having some kind of transaction that I want to add it into the existing blockchain. So now if I want to consider this T1 which contains some kind of transaction, so it is going to be going to be constituted with the hash of let's say hash of T1. It is going to be going to be, let's say if I want to change this particular transaction, I just take an example. I am an attacker, I am an adversary, and I want to make some changes to the existing transaction, and I want to make this particular change in this particular transaction. So if I want to change in this particular transaction, then now we will see our objective is like that, how this is going to have a kind of effect on the entire network. Now see this particular hash. Let's say, for example, this is equal to H0001. In order to just demonstrate you, if we start from the root, then it is the hash of the root. And it is, if I take this as an example, it has a direct impact on these two. If I take this as an example, it has direct impact on these two. Let's say if I want to change this particular transaction, then hash of this particular transaction is going to be changed, which is going to be a leaf node here, L2. And then, because if I am as an adversary, if I want to change it, then it has impact on this particular transaction also. If it has impact on this particular transaction, it is attached to this, then it has the impact on the root also. So this is the way that tampering of the data is not possible in the blockchain, because anywhere if you want to make any kind of changes, because it uses a concept of a Merkle tree root representation. So the transactions here are organized in a Merkle tree structure, which is going to be a kind of a parent-child like structure. So the root of a Merkle tree is a verification of all the transactions. So this root is responsible to take the verification, or to have the verification of all the transactions that are committed. Let's say if I want to change this particular transaction, so this is going to be attached with this particular transaction. So hash of this transaction is going to be changed. Then hash of this transaction is going to be changed. Hash of this transaction is going to be changed. And the entire network hash is going to be changed. So entire transactions are going to be changed. And this is going to be alarming situation for each and every user, that there is some wrong activity going on in the network, and the intention is not right. So this is the way that we can say that blockchain tampering of data in the blockchain is not possible. Now coming back to our previous discussion, so the mining procedure we have already discussed. So in this particular case, what is the sole objective of the mining procedure? So where we need to generate some kind of hash. So the mining mechanism need to be complicated enough to make the blockchain tamper proof. So if I take an example of, let's say, Bitcoin mining, so the hash function looks like that, where h of k in generalized, if I talk about, hash of k is equal to hash of k minus 1, t and nonce. So what is this t? T here I have considered as a set of transactions that you want to commit. And so what is the ultimate task? The ultimate task of the miner is to find the nonce value basically. What is this? This is a kind of a random value, such that hash of k has certain predefined complexity. Predefined complexity means what? Some kind of number of zeros at the prefix means the complexity of the respective mining algorithm. So if h of k is known, that means hash of k or any given transaction is known to you, then we cannot find out the message. But at the same time, if the message is known to us, we can find the hash. So vice versa is not possible. I again repeat, if the hash of any transaction you know, you cannot find out the message. But if the message is known to you, then you can easily find out the hash of that particular message, or that we can call it as a message digest also. So the header contains some kind of mining statistics like the timestamp, the nonce, and the difficulty. So now the next part is we will still continue discussing about the block header. So if I take an example of block header, let's say this is the block header will contain some kind of summaries in the form of what? It contains the number of transactions. So firstly, it is belongs to which miner. So BTC.top correspond to what? BTC.top is the miner who has generated this particular block. So by seeing this particular block header, you cannot realize that this particular block belongs to which particular person, because here we have to, this is also one of the property of the blockchain, that we need to preserve the privacy of all the nodes or all the users. So here it contains some of the features that how many transactions are committed already inside this particular block. So like 2580 transactions are already committed. What is the output of the total transactions that are committed, this much Bitcoin, what is the estimated transaction volume, what is the transaction fees, okay, in order to commit the transaction into that particular block, what kind of fees the miner has to pay, what is the height of that particular blockchain already, okay, what is the timestamp and receive time, and basically the miner who have created this particular or generated this particular block. So there are some kind of statistics available related to the block header, some information from which you can visualize that what is there inside the block basically, or what is there inside the block header, which is one of the component of the block. Now, on the again, there are some more information available on the block header where you have some kind of difficulty. So here the difficulty means what? It means the what kind of hash finding or mining algorithm you are going to use, and how many bits are there in the block. It represents that how many bits are there in the block, and the weight correspond to what? Weight correspond to the size among the different blocks. What is the size among the different blocks? And the nonce means what? The which is to be used to generate the basically the hash value. And block reward is the total Bitcoin which the miner will get after generating this particular block. Because if the miner is not getting any kind of reward, then again it is going to be a kind of a discouragement for the miner to take part in the mining procedure. So that's the way this block reward comes into the picture, irrespective of it whether your transactions are added into the blockchain or not. Some kind of reward is given to the miner to motivate them to take part in the mining procedure. So whatever we have explained with reference to the Bitcoin architecture. Now moving further, so the hashes in a block header. So here, what are the different hashes inside the block header? So we are having the 4. This is the hash, basically hash of the block. This is the hash of the previous block, and this one is the hash of the next block, and this is the hash of the Merkle root. So inside the block, we are having different kind of hashes, the hash of that particular block, hash of the previous block, hash of the next block, and the Merkle root. So block identifier, basically, it is going to be the hash of the current block. So for that particular purpose, I have already told you that we are going to use the double SHA-256. So previous block hash is used to compute the current block hash. If an attacker, let's say, want to make any kind of change in the transactions, then this Merkle root hash gets changed, and then the corresponding hash value gets changed, and finally the next block hash value changed. So it is just like that, they are interdependent on each other. Let's say, for example, if any attacker want to make any kind of changes in the existing transaction, then the Merkle root hash is going to be changed. If the Merkle root hash is going to be changed, then the corresponding hash is going to be changed, and finally the next block hash is going to be changed. It is just like that we have discussed here, that if I am going to change this particular transaction, then it is interdependent on this. So this hash is going to be changed, then this root hash is going to be changed. So it is just like that, the entire structure of your network is going to be changed. So which gives a kind of a feeling that something wrong is going on in the network, and it gives a kind of alarm to all the nodes that someone is trying to attack the entire network or make some kind of alteration or modification in the already committed transaction. So these are about the hashes that are there in the block header. Now moving further, so the transactions are organized as a Merkle tree, and the Merkle root is used to construct the block hash basically. So if you change a transaction, you need to change all the subsequent block hash that we have seen in the Merkle root also. So the difficulty of mining algorithm determines the toughness of tampering with a block. That means if someone is going to ask you that how much it is possible to tamper the data that is available inside the block, So there is a straightforward answer that tampering of the data of the transactions that are already available inside the block is dependent on what difficulty level you have set for the mining algorithm. So the toughness of your data, or you can say the safety of your transaction, is directly proportional to the difficulty of the mining algorithm. So if the difficulty is not very high, then it may happen that by the time a miner will accept a block, an attacker can change the hash of all the blocks, means the attacker may be successful in their goal. So in this situation, one must ensure that finding the hash value is as tough as possible, so that attacker cannot change the hash value of the entire blockchain, but it is going to be a trade-off here. If you make it more complex, if you make it more tough, then you need to consume the mining resources in terms of the miner, and the mining will take more time. So it depends upon the requirement of your application, that how much you want to set this difficulty level tough. Okay. Now moving further, so this is the complete, we can say, the transaction in a block. So now you can, after seeing this particular slide, can you predict that who has transferred how much amount from his account to another account? So this is going to be the layout of the block. Inside the block, you are having multiple transactions. So this is not a transaction. Basically here, the first one, here one miner got some kind of Bitcoin from the mining procedure. So that's the way we are not having some kind of who has transferred which amount from whom to whom. Like in this particular case, it is going to be a kind of a transfer, like I have transferred 100 rupees from my account to another account. So Sudeep Tanwar has transferred 50, let's say 100 rupees from his account to another account. So you cannot visualize after seeing these hashes that this transfer belongs to which person, but you can visualize that there is a kind of a transaction between these two users, and this transaction cost is this much. And why there is no initiator? Because this is not going to be a kind of a transaction. In this particular case, the miner will get some kind of reward because of some kind of mining procedure. So like the way you have to, this is what, this is the this is going to be the every transaction will have their own hash also. So this is the hash of transaction 1. I'm just taking an example, and this is the hash of transaction 2, and this is going to be a kind of a transaction between two users, and this is going to be a kind of a transaction between two users. So in this particular example, I am having three transactions: transaction number 1, transaction number 2, and transaction number 3. So in the first transaction, there is no initiator, because the some bitcoins the miner will get because of the mining procedure, and here it is going to be a kind of a transaction between these two users. So the structure is like that. Every transaction will have its own hash. Okay, and inside the block we can have multiple transactions. So now moving further, so what we have discussed in nutshell, I will tell you. We have discussed about the blockchain contains two parts, very important and significant part, that we can say the block header and the data, or data in the sense of the transactions, or the header of a block connect the transactions. Any change in any transaction will result in a change at a block header, and the headers of subsequent blocks are connected in a chain, and the entire blockchain need to be updated if you want to make any changes anywhere. So that part we have discussed. Now moving further, now in the couple of few slides we are going to discuss about the concept of replica, from where this concept of replica comes into the picture, and what exactly the meaning of concept of replica in the blockchain. So just a minute. So in the next part, we will see that how you will manage the replica. So every peer in a blockchain network maintains a local copy of the blockchain, that you can call it as a distributed ledger, because every individual, every stakeholder is having the distributed ledger. So now what is the requirement from this distributed ledger or this local copy? The requirement for this local copy is like that all the replica need to be updated. What is the meaning of that? That means whatever be the last committed transactions are there, all the peers will have the updated copy with them. Second requirement is all the replica need to be consistent. That means it is not like that for one of the user is having the updated copy and second one is not having the updated copy. So there should be there should be consistency in the distributed ledger or having this local copy of the entire replica. So the copy of the blockchain at different peers need to be exactly similar. There is no chances of having any kind of monopoly. So from this particular concept of replica in the blockchain, here the notion of consensus comes into the picture. So now we will see in next few slides what is the meaning of this notion of consensus and why this notion of consensus comes into the picture from the concept of replica. Uh, so what exactly the meaning of notion of consensus? So ensure that the different nodes in the network see the same data nearly at the same time. So let's say, for example, I have considered one scenario. So in your entire network, let's say some transactions are already committed. So everyone in the network can see the same data nearly at the same time. So in this particular case, all the nodes in the network need to agree or gives their consent on a regular basis that the data stored by them is the same, which are already available on the blockchain in the form of a local copy of the entire blockchain. So this algorithm, we can call it as a consensus algorithm. So that means what is the meaning of consensus algorithm that we have already discussed by taking some of the realistic examples. Also, we have already explained that how can we categorize the consensus algorithm and what are the various types of consensus algorithm when it comes to the public blockchain and the private blockchain. So this consensus algorithm ensures that there is no single point of failure. The data is centralized and the system can provide service even in the presence of the failure that we have seen in the case of the Byzantine or practical Byzantine fault tolerance based on consensus algorithm, unless and until the network get disconnected. So unless and until we have the connectivity in the network, reaching to a consensus is not going to be a problem. Now moving further, so let's say the basic philosophy is like that we are following the message passing structure. So what is this message passing structure? Because in case of message passing structure, you need to inform your current state to all the other group members, and so that everyone can match their current state and with the other in the network, and they validate their local data. So it is just like that. Let's say I am having 5 rupees. I am having 5 rupees. This message I need to. I have received 5 rupees from Ram. I'm just taking an example. So this information I want to disseminate to all the peers. Those are a part of my network. Why? Because so that they will check their ledger that whether they have this kind of entry available in their ledger or not. If they don't have this entry in their ledger, then they will raise their point. Otherwise, they can validate their local data. So you can check that you have the latest data that your peers will have or not. So this is the point you can check that whether you are having the latest data that your peers will have. So however, this philosophy requires that the participant in the consensus algorithm know each other, because you need to find out with which node you need to validate or match your data. So that means it is going to be a well applicable concept in the when it comes to the synchronous environment. When I know that who are my neighbors and what timestamp I am getting the data, if I don't know that who are my neighbors and at what timestamp I am getting the data, then it is very typical to find out that and to match that who is going to for which data I am going to match and rest of the problem. So now moving further, can we achieve consensus even when the network is arbitrarily large and no participant in the network really know each other? So in this particular case, if I consider, let's say, for example, if the network is very large and let's say network will contain 10,000 of nodes, 10,000 of users are there in the network, and these 10,000 person are not knowing to each other. That means they are unaware about themselves, that who are my neighbor. Okay, so this we can call it as an open network scenario or permissionless protocol scenario. You do not record your identity while participating in the consensus system. So for that particular environment, a challenge response based system we need to take care. Why? Because the network would pose a challenge itself, that if you want to commit your transaction, the network has posed a particular challenge, and every miner is trying to solve that particular challenge, and each node in the network would attempt to solve that particular challenge. So this kind of mechanism in the blockchain network pertaining to the distributed consensus, we can call it as a challenge response based system. So here the nodes need not to reveal their identity, and network giving them the challenge itself. And the traditional message passing algorithm, second way is the traditional message passing system, do not work directly here because you don't know each other. So if I know each other, if if I know each other, let's say for example, if my environment is public environment and I know each other, then the message passing structure is going to help me, like we have seen in the permission environment, like in Paxos, in Raft, in PBT, in Byzantine fault tolerance also. But when I don't know who are my neighbors, at what timestamp I am getting the data, I am not directly connected with each other. So in this particular scenario, the traditional message passing algorithm is not going to help me. I have to go for with the challenge response based mechanism. Now moving further, so now the interesting part is the challenge response protocol, where the nodes in the network try to solve the challenge posed by the network, and the nodes or the participant do not need to reveal their identity, and the node that is able to solve the challenge first would be get to dictate and what the next set of data or the state element to be added. That means whosoever will win the challenge and pose and have the solution of the challenge which was posed by the network, their transactions are added into the blockchain first. This will continue iteratively round by round and at the different rounds, and till we have the transactions that we need to add into the existing blockchain. So ultimately, what are the challenges with respect to the response to the permissionless consensus protocol? So design a good challenge. That means what kind of, because it is mining is solely dependent on which kind of challenge will be posed by the network. So ultimately, design of a good challenge which will ensure that the different nodes will win the challenge at different round. It is not like that a specific group of user in every round will have the solution to that particular problem. So this is going to be a first level of challenge. Second one is because it ensures that no node would be able to control the entire network at any round. If this will happen, then it will create dissatisfaction among the different peers, and it will create a kind of a monopoly in the network, which is not good for the overall performance of the network. So in one round, one node will solve the challenge, and in another round will say, I am ready to solve this challenge, and this block is valid, and add it into the existing blockchain. So this idea is known as the Bitcoin proof of work algorithm, which ensures the consensus over a permissionless setting based on the challenge response based mechanism. And with respect to that implementation, we have already covered related to the proof of work, where mining is solely dependent on the whatever be the competing resources you are having, because the environment is a permissionless environment or public environment. Now, what is the economics behind the blockchain consensus? Because the challenge response requires that every node spend large amount of computational power time to solve a mathematical challenge in each iteration of consensus, because it goes round by round. So in every round you have to solve, miner will have to solve the challenge. So what is the incentive or benefits for the nodes? Why they participate in the challenge response mechanism? So only one will win in each round. So what would be the incentive for the miners? And then this digital money comes into the picture in order to give a kind of a appreciation, a kind of a encouragement to all the miners, so that they can take part in the mining procedure. So what is this digital money, which ensures some kind of operational efficiency, some kind of more level of controlling the monetary policies. So in 1998, Vaidai published a B-money, which is a kind of a distributed cash system. And we can say the mother of the concept of cryptocurrency or Bitcoin. So if you just Google it, who inventor of Bitcoin, or we can say the mother of the concept of cryptocurrency or Bitcoin, then you will find a name that is Vaidai. So she has proposed a kind of a V-money basically. So there is no physical currency, and the network will generate the currency, and you need to distribute that currency which will be generated by the network to all the peers. And that is the way you go round by round and calculate the entire worth of your network. So from here, this concept of cryptocurrency comes into the picture, which is a kind of a currency beyond the control of banks and government. So network will generate the currency here in this particular environment, and the mining ensures that no node has the power to capture the entire network and gain the control, which is the good part of the Bitcoin network, because no one can hold the control of the cryptocurrency. Round by round, your turn will come, and for the respective round, you are only entitled to decide that whose transactions are going to be added. But it is not like that for every round you are capable enough. No, it is only dependent on the mining procedure. So the computational effort expended by the nodes in achieving consensus would be paid for by cryptocurrency generated and managed by the network. So there is a kind of participating benefit to the miners, that if they want to participate, then they will get certain amount of money because they spent some of their computational resources in terms of memory or in terms of CPU utilization. So blockchain ensures that the currency is secure and tamper-proof. So in nutshell, what we have discussed the technology behind the blockchain, that is the data structure, is the distributed ledger, cryptocurrency and digital signature, which ensure the security and tamper-proof architecture. The consensus over a permission-less environment we have discussed, and the economy of the revenue model that encourage the participant to join in the mining procedure. So that part we have discussed in this particular lecture. So now, without wasting the time, I will just again, after maybe 2 minutes, I am going to share my PPTs, and then I am going to share these. Just a minute, I am going to share again the screen with all of you, because today we need to wind up the one implementation related to reward distribution in Node.js, how this reward is going to be distributed. We will take only 2 minute, 2 to 3 minute break. I again come back, and after 2 minutes, not more than 2 to 3 minutes, and then share my screen. PPTs, some students are asking about the PPTs. I have already told you these PPTs are, many of the PPTs are part of my authored book, and which will be released by the end of April or maybe in the May. So till that book is going to be released in the market, I'm not going to share these PPTs with all of you, because I request the organizer, because organizer are having the recordings of each and every session. So I request the organizer, please share the recordings with all of you. And the moment this book is in the market, then I'm going to share these PPTs with the organizer, and then they will send all the PPTs to all of you.
Okay, sir, we have already shared the recordings with them.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. So let me share my screen again. So as far as implementation is going to concern, let me increase the font size. So in the last class, we have discussed about the implementation related to the proof of work, or the how to create the blockchain. So today we are going to discuss the how the mining reward is going to be distributed. And I have already given you a kind of a clue that this is not only one way of implementing the mining reward distribution. You can implement it in Python, you can implement it in Java, you can implement it in C language also. So choice is your language, doesn't make any kind of difference. Only the construct part or your programming part will change. Rest of the terminology will remain same. So as far as the terminology of reward distribution is going to concern, so in case of the reward distribution, if you remember from where this reward concept comes into the picture. So this reward concept comes into the picture from where it gives a kind of a discouragement. Let's say, for example, I again take the same example. If in every round for a particular specific group of person, their transactions are added into the blockchain, then it gives a kind of a discouragement to all the miners to take part in the mining procedure. So then the Nakamoto proposed this idea that why don't we give a kind of a incentive to all the miners, those who have taken part in the mining procedure, irrespective of it whether their transactions are added into the blockchain or not. So that's the way this rewards comes into the picture. Whenever you take part in the mining procedure, certain amount of bitcoins are credited to your account depending upon your wealth. So now we will discuss this implementation in the subsequent discussion. So now some of the code will remain same as we have already discussed when we have discussed about the how to implement the proof of work or how to create the blockchain. So in this particular case, I have already told you that we are going to use the SHA-256 in order to generate the hash. So same SHA-256 crypto.js file we need for this implementation also. So we need to define a class transaction, okay, and then we need to define from which address to which address you need to transfer how much amount. So you need to define it. After that, once you have defined it, then you need to create a class block. So inside the block, remember this type of command we have already used, that we are having the timestamp, we are having the transactions, we are having the previous hash. So that all we need to define. Initially, the value of node is equal to 0. And then we will be using the SHA-256 in as far as the implementation of cryptographic function is used, where we need to generate some kind of hash for any given block. So for this particular purpose, I am using, let me just, yes, for this particular purpose, I am going to use this command. This will remain same. Whatever attributes we have defined here, for all these attributes, we need to calculate the hash. After that, we need to start the mining procedure. And once we have started the mining procedure, then we need to start the difficulty. We need to fix up the difficulty. Okay, and one by one, we need to increase it over the period of mining procedure. And we need to display that a new block was mined, and we need to specify the hash of this particular block because it's a kind of a append list. And then we need to define a class blockchain where the first variable of the blockchain array that we can call it as a genesis block, we need to create it manually. So you see here, if I have given the difficulty here 10, and in every round the mining reward is given 10. So this 10 indicate what? So here the choice is your, whether you are dealing in the, because we are dealing in the not the physical currency, we are dealing with the cryptocurrency or virtual currency. So you need to have gas or you need to have ether, whatever you want to use. Then we need to create the genesis block. So then we need to get the latest block. So this is the way that we need to go up to the length -1 of the blockchain. And then we need to we need to distribute this mining reward. So let's say, for example, in order to, with respect to the difficulty, you have to say that what kind of difficulty you have set and what kind of block you need to add into the existing blockchain. And then you need to create a kind of a transactions that how many transactions are pending. And then you need to check each address in the blockchain from where to where and work with the balance accordingly. Let's say initially you have the balance 0 for all the miners. Okay, as far as the reward is going to be distributed, then you need to check that this transaction, whose transactions are added into the blockchain. So apart from that, you need to transfer the amount which you have set in your mining procedure. Then you need to check the block valid, whether that particular block is valid block or not. So you start from the first block and up to the length. and then you need to take one by one block and you need to define it, and then you need to have a new transaction. So here I have considered three person, Tom, Jerry. Okay, so you need to start the mining procedure, and then after that you need to check the balance for the Tom, and then balance for the Jerry, and then the balance which you need to give to the Donald. And after that, what you need to do, you need to have again start the mining, and then see that how much amount the Donald is going to get, and then again. So because I am giving more emphasis here only to just to show you that how the reward is going to be credited to the account of any of the miner. Okay, so now here I have considered three miner. So now if I want to compile it, I need to go to the terminal. Then I need to write the name of my file. So name of my file is node. Then the name of file is mine reward.js. So if I just type it, then it will give me what? It will give me a kind of a error. Basically, let me check why it give a kind of a error. Minor. Okay, spelling of the file is not right. So let me write it again. Node min reward.js. So whatever file name you have given. So yes. So now see it very carefully. Let's say, for example, a mining is started. A new block was mined with the hash. This is the hash of the new block. And the block mined successfully. Once the block mined successfully, then you have the balance of all the miners. So first miner is Tom having balance, just I am taking example 70. Then the Jerry having balance 70, and the Donald miner is having balance 0. I'm just taking example in order to demonstrate you how this 0 is to be initialized here 0, and how this is going to be the mining reward is going to be added in the account of the Donald. Then again, we have to start the mining procedure. So a new block was mined with the hash. This is the hash of the new block. The block mined successfully. This is the balance for the Donald 10. And then again the mining started. So in the next round, he will get 20. Why 10, 10? Because in the program, we have set the that how much reward is going to be distributed to the miner. So this is a very simple example to demonstrate you. If you want to increase the complexity, you can have 10 miners. You can make a kind of a distributed ledger and use a kind of a class where you have to define certain other attributes, inline it, or make a kind of a database also where you need to store some kind of transactions. Okay, so this is the way you can increase the complexity of this particular data. Okay. So this is end from my side. So I will brief you what we have discussed in today's class. So in today's class, we have discussed some of the fundamentals related to the blockchain, like block reward, blockchain, and we have discussed about how the mining reward is going to be distributed among the different stakeholders. So what is the, I'm just stop sharing here. The agenda for next lecture is we need to, in the next session, we are going to cover about some of the use cases we are going to start, because these use cases are very, very important for you, that how you are going to apply the blockchain in the different segment, different verticals of Industry 4.0. So this is end from my side. If you have any question, then we will take some questions.
Hello, sir. I have a query.
Yes, please.
Sir, you told us that the block difficulty should be more, and
Block
then it should.
difficulty. Yes.
But sir, there is always a fixed algorithm, like to what to hash or what to not hash.
No.
So
Firstly,
I think block
according to you, what is the meaning of difficulty?
sir, difficulty, as you told that as you told that it is matlab, how it
Difficulty
is
means
difficult
better.
to
I will tell.
how
I
it is
will.
difficult to hack
Yes.
hack.
Yes. Exactly. Very much right. I will tell you again. What is the meaning of difficulty? The difficulty meaning is like that. Let's say, for example, you have some data, and you want to keep your data safe from the attacker. Okay. Then the next question comes, how you are going to keep all the transactions safe on a safer side from the attacker perspective or from the attacker side. That's the way this mining process comes into the picture, that how you are going to set the difficulty. Because the higher the difficulty you are having, the less chances from the miner that miner will have a kind of attack on your system. But the worst part is that the more difficulty level you are going to set in your program or in your consensus protocol, it will take more time for the mining to complete in the round one. And this mining is going to be is a kind of a iterative process. It goes round by round. Believe me, if let's say in my program also you have noticed or not, I think in the last to last session, where I have increased the difficulty level from 2 to 10, then I am not able to get the outcome from my program within let's say 3 minutes or 4 minutes. And when I set the difficulty 2, I am getting the response of the mining completed within a fraction of seconds. So what does it indicate? It indicates that how much complex is my mining algorithm. So there is to be kind of a trade-off between setting the mining difficulty, and whatever you are saying is exactly right, that there are certain kind of algorithms, mining algorithms are available, where there are some kind of fixed complexity is given to you, but it is a kind of a research question for you also to work for you, that how you are going to increase the complexity level for a given mining algorithm. Getting my point or not?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And sir, a hacker cannot attack the block because of the consensus algorithm. So how does it matter anyway?
Means attacker cannot attack the on the block.
I mean, even if he attacked, but
Yes.
due to the consensus algorithm, nobody will accept his blockchain if he
No,
change some
it is
value.
just like that. Beta attacker is going to attack on a particular block. Let's say, for example, है ना? For what intention attacker want to attack on a particular block? Because attacker want to make some kind of modifications on the already committed transaction. That is the intention from the side of the attacker. And that in, let's say I've just taken an example, and attacker want to make some kind of changes to the already committed transaction. Okay. So in that particular case, that means the intention of the attacker is not right, because attacker want to make some kind of editing of the already committed transaction. So that means how your then the role comes with the mining procedure, that what system you are having, that how it is going to have a kind of alarming situation for the other. Because in today lecture also I have discussed that the blockchain is going to use the Merkle root structure. If you are going to change any of the hash, then the subsequent hash are going to be changed, because it's a interlink and parent child like relationship. But yes, it is
Yes,
very much
yes,
true that it is
that's what my point. It's
yes,
it's impossible to hack it.
not
So
100% I
why does
cannot
the
claim.
difficulty? Why does the
100%,
difficulty matter?
100% beta, I cannot claim, or no one can claim. Why? Because there are couple of chances where the attacker get the access of your network and make some kind of changes in the existing transaction. But what are those circumstances? If the attacker can do more work than the work collectively performed by all the miner, by investing more resources and having some kind of high performance computing devices or GPUs available. So that's the way this complexity comes into the picture, that you have to invest the resources of the attacker also, so that it gives a kind of a discouragement to the attacker also. If the attacker want to attack in that particular system, then attacker has to invest more resources as compared to the other. So this is going to be a kind of a trade-off, that how the attacker is going to take care of this particular situation. Okay.
And but sir, what if the group of hackers do to attack? I mean, the
Yes.
nodes are majority of hackers.
So that's the way this 50% comes into the picture, no? That's the way this 50%, if
Okay,
you want
sir.
to
Okay.
explore it more, na, then you go to 51% of attack. Then you realize it that it is not a kind of a system where I give a kind of a bribe to someone else and say that, hey, if you just vote in favor of me, I will give this much amount to you. But you cannot capture the entire network. There are some kind of trustee nodes are available, and but again, there is a point that how much trusted nodes we are having in our network just to start our process of mining. Okay.
But sir, haven't any group or organization or node ever tried to hack?
Yes, yes. If you just Google it, na, you will find number of use cases. I will also send to your Sakshi ma'am, and she will send to all of you. There are couple of use cases. If you want to refer it, you will find that how the attacker have gained the access to a particular system. Okay, so I will. I think in November 2017 or November 2019, there was a couple of 2-3 use cases where the attacker have gained the access of the entire network and make some kind of falsification of the data and inject some kind of duplicate entries and make some changes to the, and that to happen with the financial institutions. I'm not quoting the name of that particular bank, not belongs to India. Okay, so I will share these resources with you so that you after reading this material you came to know that how it is feasible. Why 100% we are not saying that it is not possible. Okay.
Okay, sir.
So thank you very much, all of you, and we will meet tomorrow at 3. So thank you very much, all of you. Thank you, Sakshi ma'am.
Thank you so much, sir.
Sakshi ma'am, you just please drop an email to me so that I will get your email ID and send some resource material to you so that you will send
Okay,
to the rest of the student.
okay, sir.
Thank you,
Sir,
ma'am. Thank you. Yes, yes, please.
actually, there is a holiday, government holiday tomorrow. So at
Tomorrow
your
is,
end also, is there any kind of that, or should we plan class tomorrow?
it's up to you, no problem. Whatever you want to, no problem. You ask from the student and get back to me whether they are willing to attend this lecture or tomorrow or not. No problem. From
So,
my end, there is no problem.
okay, sir. So
So,
everyone else in the meeting, can you please tell me right now only that whether you want a class tomorrow or not? Either reply in the chat window or unmute yourself.
Ma'am, we can have.
Okay, sir. Sir, let's have a
yes, yes,
class tomorrow.
yes, yes, no problem, no problem. Yes.
Okay, sir.
Okay,
We'll
ma'am.
have a
Thank you.
class at 3
Yeah,
only.
yeah. Thank you.
Okay, sir.